Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. FPL Consult here. FPL 24-25 season is here. The game will be launching very soon. I am recording this just before it is about to launch. My expectation is by the time you're watching this, it could already be out. So do keep a lookout for that, and because this season is up and coming, we are going to start to ramp up the content on the channel. I took a bit of a break. I did not make any Euros content, as you guys would have known, but that was because I was taking the time to make some changes to the channel. So I've changed a bit of the logo as well, gave the channel a bit of a refreshed look. Hopefully you guys like it. Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. But I'm very excited to be back for the 24-25 season. I hope you guys are too, and I will be talking through my first draft for the new season in today's video. So you will, those of you who are very engaged and have already caught up with the latest news yesterday, it is that there are new rules to the FPL game right now. So I'll talk a bit about them and share my thoughts, as well as some overall general season thoughts as well, before we go into discussing the fixtures and then talking about my draft at the last part. So hopefully you guys do enjoy this video. If you do, please do drop a like. Please do subscribe as well if you want to stay up to date to all the content this season. Alright, so let's get into this graphic here, and the first thing that I want to talk about, or the first three things at least, is the new rules that we're going to have for the 24-25 season. So the first one is that there will be a mystery chip. So this is an unknown chip. It will only be available for us to use in January. So that basically means the second half of the season. And I guess there's no real way to prepare for this, just that FPL have told us there will be a new chip. I'm kind of confused as to why they would do that instead of just telling us the chip outrightly. But I think maybe they haven't even decided what they want to do with the chip, or they just want to keep managers engaged all the way till that point. So whatever the case is, no, we are all in the same boat right now, so no one knows. And I guess the best way to prepare for it is potentially saving some chips all the way up till maybe saving your wild card, your first wild card, for example, all the way up till the point where they release the mystery chip, or they let us know what it is, so that we can kind of use the extra wildcard there to plan accordingly. But in general, we're all in the same boat. Nobody knows. We'll only get more information later on. Now, the next one is about rolling transfers. So this one is a massive change here. We can now roll up to 5 transfers. So obviously, if you've been playing all the previous seasons, you would know that it's been so long that FPL have only allowed us to roll 2 free transfers at maximum, but now they have increased the cap to 5 free transfers that we can keep. So basically, my thoughts on this is that it is a positive change. I think it is good for the game. And I think the likelihood of us actually having 5 free transfers is pretty low. But that said, it is good to have this option, because we can then kind of use it as a mini wildcard if we need to. The thing is, I'm just thinking back to the later part of last season, or at least the second half of last season. I remember making so many changes every week that was down to injury. So every week I wanted to bank my transfer, but I had to use it because of injuries. And that was pretty much, I guess, maybe for the 19 transfers that I had for the second half of the season, I guess maybe up to 10 transfers were used dealing with injury. So I think the likelihood of us having up to 5 is very low. But that said, it is good to have the option, and I think it is a positive change. And I also do feel like it could lead to some complications where complications not in game mechanics, but I guess in terms of trying to catch your mini league rivals, because those who are ahead, I do imagine, will be able to bank their transfers, because if you go for a player that everyone wants to hop on, you essentially save a transfer. If you don't have to deal with injuries, you also get to bank a transfer. So those who are ahead, I think, will get very far ahead, and those who are catching up may find it hard to catch up to those who are already ahead. So that's my initial thoughts of it, but generally I still think it's a positive change. The saved transfers, do take note, will not reset after the wildcard and the free hit. So this again is a very massive change, because previously, after you wildcard and after you free hit, the transfers that you have reset to one transfer that you will have the week after you wildcard or free hit. So they've changed this up. If you saved 5 free transfers and then you play a wild card, the week after the wild card, you will still have your 5 free transfers. So I think in general that kind of opens up the door for a lot of different chip strategies, which I will cover in a later video. Right, there'll be many videos coming up, so do hit subscribe to keep up to date with all the videos. But in general, this does open up a lot of different transfer strategies that we can go for, and chip strategies. So something that comes to mind as well is that all this while we've been looking at maybe 6 to 7 game week fixture blocks. But I think now we can kind of narrow it down a little bit more. Maybe we can go for 4 to 5 game week blocks, and then bank a few transfers there, and then use kind of a mini wildcard to reset for the next block of maybe 4 to 5 game weeks again. So I think in general there's lots of strategies that are going to come about because of this possibility to roll up to 5 free transfers. So there we go with that. The next thing is the changes to the bonus points system. So in general, I wouldn't list out all the things here because there are a couple of changes, but what I would say is that all the changes to the bonus point systems generally favors the attackers more than the defenders. Now, a lot of inclusions into the bonus point systems now come for shots on target. You also get fouls won. So I think in general, those type of players that maybe Jack Grealish or Saka, Foden, players who take a lot of shots on target, players like Salah as well, of course, and obviously who are fouled more, right, in the lead up to the goal, maybe, or in the lead up to the play. If they're very involved, generally they always get fouled. Players like Jack Grealish, we will know. So they are players that can rack up quite a number of bonus points in the bonus point system, right? So I think in general, we do have to kind of favor the attackers a little bit more. Does this mean that we go for small at the back and then load up funds in the attackers because attackers are more likely to get bonus points? That remains to be seen. I think in general, what I would say about the bonus point system is that I do like these changes because in general we would be rewarding attackers slightly more for their involvement, because previously it did seem as if the moment defenders got an attacking return, they probably gonna get bonus points as well. So they've kind of tailored it a little bit. I do like the changes there. And also bear in mind for defenders, they get a -4 on the bonus point system for each goal that the team concedes. So again, another way that attackers stand to benefit slightly more than weaker defenses. So there we go with the bonus point system. So the last 2 pointers that I have here are just some of my general early thoughts on this coming season, which is the 24-25 season. I think firstly, the bench boost and the free hit chip will be less powerful this season than it was in the previous seasons. Now, this is because, as the FA have already announced, there will be a particular game week set aside, or a particular weekend set aside for FA Cup. Now, previously, it wasn't the case. They were sharing a weekend with the Premier League, and that's why it had to cause many blanks, many doubles. But now, they have their own weekend. And basically what that means is that there's going to be less postponements, and less postponements means less blanks and double game weeks. So I do feel like the bench boost and the free hit chip are slightly less powerful this season. So don't rule out a game week 1 bench boost. It is definitely a viable strategy for some of you guys who want to go for that. Right, the free hit, I think most of us would still likely save it for a blank game week, because even though there's lesser postponements, there will still be a decent chunk of players potentially missing out, because when those blank fixtures come around, they're likely for the stronger teams like Man City, Liverpool, etc., and that's when the free hit will be useful. So I'll probably still save it for the blank game week for the free hit. The bench boost, I think you pretty much can be open to using it in a single game week. I wouldn't rule that out. Now, the price points is the last thing I want to talk about before we jump onto the fixtures. The price points are very, very tricky this season. I think it is a good move by the FPL towers. Basically, there's a lot of players who have risen in price, and rightly so. Haaland, of course, in this graphic here, has risen to 15 million, and that is an insane amount, the highest in FPL history. So there has to be some serious thought going into whether we want to go for Haaland or not. I think for the time being, I would say there's pros and cons, of course, to both. General thoughts around whether to go for him or not is how often you'll be captaining him, of course. Does he justify the 15 million price point? And what else or which other players can you go for? Other player combinations that you can go for instead of Haaland. I think I've seen some people on Twitter comparing, let's say, Haaland and a 4.5 million bench fodder versus maybe Foden plus Kevin De Bruyne. I don't think that's a fair comparison because if you go for Foden and Kevin De Bruyne, you will be playing both of them in your starting 11. But if you go for Haaland, you would be going for Haaland and you'd be benching the 4.5 million bench fodder. So I don't think that's a fair comparison if you're kind of comparing it in terms of price points. What I would say is you take a look at going for Haaland and see who you have to play. You're going to bench the 4.5 million bench for see who you have to play in place of that, and thereafter compare that to Foden and Kevin De Bruyne if that's the comparison you want to make. I hope that is clear, but in general it is quite difficult to measure exactly whether it's worth it to go with or without Haaland. So do give it some serious thought. 15 million, he's priced this way simply because FPL do want us to make a decision here, and I do like it. Not everyone would want to go for Haaland like last season. There will be a greater variety of teams. I imagine more people would go without Haaland, at least based on some polls that I've run on Twitter as well. So I think it's a positive change. Some other price changes or price rises to players that I think are good. Saka is now 10 million, Foden is 9.5, Cole Palmer with the highest price increase at 10.5 million. I think all of this just points to one thing, and is that we can't go for all of these players. So I think the long-term solution is to find the right time to hop on and off these players. And I think with the possibility to roll up to 5 free transfers, I think that kind of plays into our minds as well, where it is possible to kind of switch between these kind of high value assets with these free transfers that we're able to bank. So I guess the pricing is kind of backed up with the possibility of rolling up to 5 free transfers. So in general, I would say I like the rule changes. There's pros and cons. Some of you may not like it, some of you will like it. Let me know in the comments below what are your thoughts. But if not, let's move on to the fixtures for the game for the new season, the 24-25 season. So taking a look at the Fantasy Football Hub fixture ticker, here are the teams with the best to the worst run of fixtures for the first 6 game weeks in the 24-25 season. Now, Fantasy Football Hub are currently running a 50% off promotion from now all the way to the start of the season, and there's loads of tools that you can use. So do go and check out the link in the description for 50% off. There's a 7-day free trial that they're running now as well if you want to give it a go. It's helped me a lot in the past few seasons, and we are continuing the partnership with Fantasy Football Hub on this channel. So if you want to support the channel as well, just head on to the link down below and give it a go. Right, so I want to jump into the fixtures here, and at the top of the list here we see Liverpool. They have the best set of fixtures for the first 6 game weeks. So it's Ipswich away in the first game week already. Already alarm bells are going on in my head saying maybe Salah captain is the best captain in game week 1. Right, and then come game week 2, they're playing at Anfield, they have Brentford. Game week 3, it's Manchester United away. And then followed by 4 and 5, it's another 2 very, very plumped home fixtures in Nottingham Forest as well as Bournemouth. And then game week 6, they have Wolves away. So in general, I think a Liverpool attacker is pretty much nailed. Whether that is Salah, whether it's Nunes or Gakpo, it's completely up to you. But I would say that Salah for me at 12.5 million, the price point that he's at, I think it's kind of justified, right? Because if we're going to captain him for a couple of game weeks here and there, I think it is worth it. So a bit of a spoiler, but Salah is in the team. And I won't give too much spoilers, but there is also another Liverpool player in the team as well. Because you look defensively, those are decent fixtures as well. So we'll talk about them later on. The next one is Fulham, also with a decent set of fixtures. In third place, there is Crystal Palace. Now, I've jumped over Fulham very quickly because I don't think there are many standout players to go for. Maybe Andreas Pereira, maybe Munoz, but Jimenez and Munoz, do they continue to share minutes, etc.? We'll have to see. Do they play together like what they did in the later part of last season? We're going to have to see. So I can't really discuss too much about Fulham there, but for Crystal Palace, they ended the season really, really well. defensively and attackingly. So I think I'm very excited by the prospects of that. Players like Eze, players like Gehi, Joachim Anderson, Mateta as well, but Mateta for me feels a little bit too expensive. So we'll go into the players later on, but for Crystal Palace, Olise has now gone to Bayern Munich, so that obviously could change maybe the way that they play. I don't think it would change too much, but obviously Olise being in that Crystal Palace team did make it look pretty strong attackingly. So let's see if they make any replacements to sign new players to replace Olise. But if not, it seems as if Eze is going to be the main talisman there for Crystal Palace. Now next up, there's Southampton, Nottingham Forest, and very closely followed by Aston Villa. So Aston Villa is another team that did really well last season. They finished in the Champions League spots. Players like Ollie Watkins had a really good 24-25 season. And defensively, I think those fixtures are pretty good as well. Right, they have West Ham away. Arsenal at home in Game Week 2 is not an easy fixture by any means, but there's Leicester, Everton, Wolves, and Ipswich in the next few game weeks. So for me, the Aston Villa defense is one that we can go for. And attackingly, I think we could be considering some of their players as well, but they have seen some price rises. Ollie Watkins is now 9 million. And Leon Bailey is now 6.5 million. So do keep a lookout for those players. Now, next up, further down the list, there's Arsenal, right? They are, I think, about 8th in the list here. It's Wolves at home, Aston Villa away, Brighton at home, and then Tottenham, Man City in Game Week 4 and 5. Those will be difficult fixtures because both are away. And then in Game Week 6, it's Leicester at home. So I think, as we can see from a general perspective for Arsenal fixtures, we still want to target their players because Arsenal is still pretty much an elite team that we have here, whether it's in attack or defense. We saw that last season. But there are tricky fixtures there for them. So I think we can tailor the number of Arsenal players that we go for. Right, next up is Manchester United with a decent run of fixtures. But again, do we really trust Manchester United? How far do we want to go with Manchester United players? That's something to consider. For Newcastle players, they have Southampton at home in Game Week 1. So again, alarm bells there going off with a really good fixture at St. James's Park. So players like Isak, players like Gordon already come to mind. And then there's Bournemouth away, Tottenham at home, Wolves away, Fulham away, and Man City at home. So in general, the block of 5 fixtures, the first 5 game weeks that they have, are really good fixtures. So Newcastle players, again, players to target. So I won't cover all the teams here. But I will just jump very quickly to Man City because we definitely do want to consider a couple of Man City players. And of course, Haaland or no Haaland, as I mentioned in the previous section, is a big consideration. But they do have tricky fixtures. So when you see the first 6 game weeks, Chelsea away is the first fixture. Ipswich in Game Week 2 is probably a Haaland captaincy kind of a fixture there. So again, it needs to come into our minds. Who do we want to captain in Game Week 2? And does that mean maybe we start with Haaland and then ship him out when we need the funds for other players? Because there's more room to play around if we are able to have up to 5 free transfers. So things to consider there. And then it's West Ham away, Brentford at home, Arsenal at home in Game Week 5, and Newcastle away in Game Week 6. Now, those are tricky fixtures. So you see in the first 6 game weeks, they have Chelsea away, Arsenal at home, and Newcastle away. So very, very tricky fixtures. Newcastle maybe defensively they're not the strongest, and Man City could score some goals there, but I wouldn't say it's an easy fixture by any means. So it's Ipswich at home, West Ham away, and Brentford at home. That middle block of 3 fixtures there that I think we still can capitalize on some Man City players. So let me know in the comments down below if you're going for Erling Haaland, and also how many Man City players you're going to go for as well. But if not, this is a general overview of the Fixture Ticker by Fantasy Football Hub, and let's now take a look at my first draft. So I've put together a draft for Game Week 1 based on the current player prices that have already been released, and there's loads of player prices that have already been released, so I do imagine the game will launch very, very soon, and I wanted to share with you guys where my head is at in terms of players. So I've gone with a team value of 99.5 million, and I've left 0.5 million in the bank. As we've seen in the previous seasons as well, leaving 0.5 million in the bank could be useful to deal with the price rises that I do imagine will be very will be moving very quickly in the first few game weeks when there's loads of transfers being made with all the engaged and casual managers all making changes, because the first few game weeks is when we will see a lot of the transfers being made. Later on, people will start to drop off and maybe price changes start to taper off a little bit. But if not, having 0.5 million in the bank, I think will be useful, and I've kind of managed it with this draft here. So it's a 3-5-2 draft we're going to go for. As I've mentioned, I think it could be useful to go for more attackers that I think could accumulate more points because of the bonus point system changes that we've seen. But I do have budget there for Trent Alexander-Arnold, which I'll touch on in a little bit as well. So it's not exactly small at the back. I think this is a balanced back line that you'll see later on with the bench as well. I've gone pretty cheap with the other two defenders. So in my starting 11 here, I've gone with Dean Henderson as the keeper of choice first. I think the Crystal Palace defense, as I've said, have been very, very strong, and they ended off the season really, really well. Dean Henderson was the keeper that was playing because Sam Johnstone was injured. Does Dean Henderson keep his spot? It remains to be seen, but I do want a Crystal Palace defensive asset in my team. The fixtures are also pretty decent for Crystal Palace from a defensive standpoint. So Brentford away in game week 1 for Dean Henderson at 4.5 million. I do think that he could be a very, very good option if he starts consistently. Then in the back 3, I've gone for Trent Alexander-Arnold, Ezri Konsa, and Vardiol. Now, Trent is 7.0 million, so it's not a very, very cheap price point for him. But I think with the fixtures that Liverpool have and the kind of inverted fullback role that he potentially could still be playing under Arne Slot, I think that will be very, very useful in terms of points accumulations for assists that he can get, all the set pieces he's on, whether it's free kicks or corners. So I think in general, Trent is an asset that could be a bit of a differential, because I don't imagine a lot of people will be jumping straight to him. There are many other assets that people are currently looking at. I don't think Trent is one of the names that jump out. But for me, with Liverpool at the top of the fixture ticker, defensively and attackingly, I think I really want to have a big differential in my Game Week 1 team, and I think Trent could be that as well. He wouldn't be a massive differential, but I think my expectation is about 15% ownership, 15 to 20% at max, so I still think that there will be some gains to be made with Trent here. Next up, there's Konsa at 4.5 million. Now, I've gone for Konsa because he's one of the more nailed defenders in an Aston Villa side that defensively are pretty solid, and also fixtures are there for Aston Villa. Konsa, of course, does have a knack of maybe picking up a corner header, or scoring from some set pieces, etc. So I do think like Konsa, his attacking threat is not the best, but how nailed he is for entry into a 4.5 million entry into an Aston Villa defense with good fixtures, I would go there. And then for Vardiol, he's at 6.0 million. For Man City defense. Now, of course, Man City's defense is still one of the best defenses in the league. And looking at the positions that Vardiol was taking up towards the end of last season, where he scored an immense number of points. I think there was one game where he's got 27 points, a double game week. So Vardiol is massive, and I think at 6 million, he kind of does justify his price point for me. So Chelsea away in game week 1, but as we mentioned, for the next 2 to 3 block of fixtures there for Vardiol is pretty good. If I want to move him on later on, we can do that, but for the first game week, or at least to start the season off, I think Vardiol is one of those gems at 6 million. I think he should have been priced at maybe 6.5 million, somewhere similar to Ben White. So because of the kind of how I feel he's underpriced, I think he's a very good asset to go for. So I've gone for these 4 players in my starting 11. Let's take a look at the midfield. So in midfield, I have Eze, Salah, Foden, Gordon, and Nkunku. So I'll talk through each of them one by one. So as I've mentioned about Eberechi, Eze, and Crystal Palace's fixtures and their form so far, of course we have to look at how they do and how they fare pre-season. But I think Eberechi Eze at 7 million is a bit of a steal, especially with the way he ended the season of the last couple of game weeks, where he was really racking up those points. And of course, he is also on penalties for Crystal Palace. Now, the only downside to Crystal Palace is Elise leaving the team and going to Bayern Munich. But that aside, I think they are still a very, very strong attacking side. They have very, very good core players in the team. Players like Guehi and Anderson form a really good back line. In midfield, there's Adam Wharton as well, a really, really solid midfielder there. And then up front, there's players like Mateta, Jordan Ayew, Eze, kind of linking up the play. I really like it. I think Mateta is slightly overpriced. I don't think people will go there. But I think Eze at 7 million is a little bit more justified because of the penalties that he has. So I've gone for Eze here. A bit of a funny story as well is that last season, I went for Eze in my first, my game week 1 draft. And I started the season with him. Obviously, he didn't start the season very well last season, but towards the kind of the middle point where he was starting to pick up points, everyone was jumping onto him. I started to sell him, and then he started returning the points. So, I mean, that's a funny story. I think in game week 1, I'm likely going to have Eze again. At least he's in the draft. Hopefully, it's a bit of a different story this time round. And then I have Salah against Ipswich away, who is currently my game week 1 captain. I think it's very hard to look away from Salah when we're talking about Liverpool players or attackers that we want to go for. Players like Nunes, sure, he can rack up a lot of shots and a lot of shots on target, but again, in general, he's just a player that I feel is lacking a bit of the clinical finishing. But Salah on penalties, etc., we know what he can do. If Liverpool do show some good preseason form, I'll be very confident to have Salah in my team against Ipswich, which is a really, really plump fixture as well. So I've chosen to go for Salah instead of players like Luis Diaz, Gakpo, Nunes, because I do imagine Salah is still the most nailed player for 90 minutes as well. Right, then we have Foden. We definitely need to have a Man City midfielder, in my opinion, because that is really where I think the points are going to come from. Because Haaland is not a player that generally racks up a lot of fouls, or he doesn't take a lot of shots, right? In general, I think the shots that he takes, he mostly scores as well. So I think a lot of chance creation as well as shot taking is by the midfielders, players like Foden, players like Kevin De Bruyne. I think that's where they can really rack up points. And Foden at 9.5 million versus maybe Kevin De Bruyne also at 9.5 million. I think I would be going for Foden right now. Right, so he's in the team. He did not have a really good Euros campaign. If that kind of affects his form in Man City, I don't imagine it will. But if we get to see some preseason clips of Phil Foden, let's hope that he gets back to his best, because we know what he's capable of. Now, I've gone for Anthony Gordon against Southampton in game week 1, right? Because their fixtures are really good. Attackingly, they are also a very solid team. Defensively, I think they raise a couple of question marks, but I think attackingly, they have proven to be a very, very solid side. Gordon as well did not get much of a run out in the Euros, but he had a very, very good campaign last season with Newcastle, so I think he's going to still be in the team here. And he is very, very good value. I think the price point that he's at really justifies it as well. So, gonna have Anthony Gordon here in the team. And then Nkunku has Man City at home. He's in the team because I would like some Chelsea coverage. They were kind of scoring quite freely towards the end of last season, where they kind of picked up, I think, close to 6 to 7 wins in a row. And I think in general, Nkunku is a player that was, hyped to be a really good asset in game week 1 last season, but he got injured in preseason, and that's why a lot of us suddenly just jumped off Nkunku. He didn't have the best campaign last season, but he's fit, he's available, he's back for Chelsea now, and I do imagine at 6.5 million, it is a 4 million price saving as compared to Cole Palmer, who's at 10.5. So I think 10.5 for Cole Palmer for me feels slightly too expensive. Yes, he picked up lots of penalties last season. Is Chelsea going to continue having that many penalties? We're not sure about that. Unlikely so. That's really, really a lot of penalties. Chelsea got the most ones last season. And from open play, fair enough, Cole Palmer is really good, but does he justify that 10.5 million price tag is something we need to consider. I think I would be opting for the 4 million price saving currently and going for Nkunku here. He could come back into my team, Cole Palmer. I'm not ruling it out, but for now, I kind of want to save that money to spend elsewhere. So I've gone for Nkunku here at 6.5 million. So this forms my midfield 5. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. And let's now take a look at the forwards. So finally, up front, it's Alexander Isak, who's my vice-captain currently, and Kai Havertz, who has Wolves at home. So now the big question that you guys will be asking is, where is Haaland? So there's no Haaland in my current Game Week 1 draft. I was surprised as well, but at the cost saving or the team that I can get to by not going for Haaland is just absolutely incredible. I mean, you look at this team as a whole, I have a very solid defense. I have Trent and Vardiol as attacking fullbacks. I have Konza as my kind of a bit of an enabler at 4.5 million. I have quite a number of penalty takers in the team. I have Salah, Eze, Isak. I also have a very strong midfield in players like Foden, Gordon, and Nkunku. Havertz up front playing really well for Arsenal towards the end of last season, where he was getting majority of the chances as well. And then Isak, who is pretty much a talisman for Newcastle in the absence of Wilson. I mean, obviously it remains to be seen because Wilson is going to be back now. Does he share minutes? What's going to happen between the rotation of the two of them? We'll see. But you take a look at this draft. It's such a strong 11 without Haaland. So really that is the downside, and it kind of begs the question, I'm really thinking about whether it is worth it to go with or without Haaland. Now, of course, I do bear in mind as well that in game week 2, Man City will be playing Ipswich, and that's likely when everyone's going to captain Haaland. So I will also try to tinker and continue trying to fit Haaland in the team. But what I will say is that the draft without Haaland looks generally more balanced overall. I will also try to put out some Haaland drafts and see the team that I can get to and then make a bit of a comparison. But for now, there's no Haaland. Right, so Isak and Havertz up front, as I've mentioned. On the bench, I have Walden. He's just a bench for the keeper at 4.0 million. And then there's João Pedro at 5.5 million, who has Everton away in game week 1 as my third forward on the bench. He's a really, really big kind of differential, I feel, because at 5.5 million, he's going to be someone that I think firstly, he's on penalties. That's one, and he's likely going to start every game because the only concern last time round in the previous season was that he wasn't getting consistent minutes. But now that Roberto De Zerbi has left Brighton, there's a new coach that's come in. I do think João Pedro is someone that could get consistent minutes, and I think he could be that kind of a differential player that we're looking for in game week 1. So I have him on the bench right now, but I'm very tempted, if I do go for this draft, I'm tempted to just bench Nkunku and start João Pedro for game week 1 as well, right? So that's kind of the bench enabler that I've gone for. As you've seen here, the first two options at least are very strong. On the bench is João Pedro and Burn. Very well could come into the starting 11 if needed. So Burn is at 4.5 million against Southampton at home for Newcastle. So as you'll see here, it's actually triple Newcastle that I have in the team. But Burn at 4.5 million, I feel, is going to be a nailed starter for Newcastle. If he keeps it up as well, we know he has a bullet header in him. He's always very, very threatening from set pieces. So he is in the team as well. And there is a pretty good rotation with Newcastle assets and Aston Villa assets. So him and Konza could form a really nice 4.5 million rotation pair there. And then my last defender at 4.0 million, a bit of a bench fodder, but it's Harwood Bellis, has Newcastle away. One of the cheaper enablers from the recently promoted teams. He's from Southampton as well. So there we go with my game week 1 draft. Let me know what you guys think. It is a very, very initial draft. It's by no means confirmed. I do imagine there will be loads of changes that I will continue to make to the draft. But let me know what you think in the comments below. And do you have Haaland? That is the biggest question I think a lot of us will be considering. So drop it in the comments below. If not, do check out the link in the description for 50% off Fantasy Football Hub. And I will catch you guys in more Game Week 1 content. There's loads of content to come on the channel, so I'm very, very excited for that. Do drop a like, do subscribe so you won't miss any of the content. And I'll catch you guys very, very soon. Bye-bye.